Hey guys, and welcome to a series on how to make a cool model. And this component we're going to be discussing specifically in Cinema 4D how to texture and place textures on multiple components and assemblies so you get this type of output without having to sit here and rip your own hair out. And this is specific for Cinema 4D, and this is going to be the end product of what we want to get to. But in this series, I also look forward to showing you modeling techniques, rigging techniques, and how to get something that is going to be the end-all model that you can actually set up for sale if you're looking to sell products. So let's get started. So a little background on what I've done. So over the years, I've spent a lot of time modeling in Cinema 4D, and I've learned a lot of tips and tricks that can make life a little bit easier. And I want to make sure that everyone out there has the same ability to do the same things that I do to make life easier and inject into a scene so that you have a good-looking model that you can navigate through and that you can have a really nice end result. I'm going to save this file, and I'm going to go over to a new file. So this is the same helicopter, and I am featuring the ND McDonnell Douglas 520N Notar, which is a rather kind of a cool helicopter if you're just looking for something that is kind of unique and whatnot. So this is a real helicopter, and I'm sure that those of you that are aviation enthusiasts, I'm sure that you're looking at this right now saying, okay, cool. So I'm a big fan of the McDonnell Douglas 500 series. The 520, 530 series has a cool look with this kind of beaded nose. So anyway, to get into this, what we want to talk about is texturing. So what I do is I always hard model surfaces with a lot of point adjustment. Oftentimes I like to lathe and create the entire model with certain tools. So we're going to talk a little bit about that later on and how to get to this point in the modeling process. But before we get there, in this tutorial I want to get very specific on putting a texture onto it. So what are we going to do? So first off, we have a little bit of cleanup that we have to do. And that cleanup work is going to come down to how we're going to create our hierarchy. So, excuse me. So what we're going to start with is, first off, I'm going to create a null. Now I can do this any way that you want to. You could even come in here and hold on your primitive and select a null. You can also hold any component that you want, hit Alt-G, and you'll create a null. And what I've done is basically take this null and I've turned it into a painted parts null. And I've dropped a whole bunch of parts in here. Now there's a lot of important kind of things to keep in mind. Most of all, the biggest thing is that whenever you're working with something, so if I hide this right now, and I have this model rigged and I've removed the rig, so let me just take a second, clean all this up, make sure that things can hide properly. Okay, almost. There we go. So when we get into rigging, it'll make more sense to what everything I'm doing right here actually it means. So I always start with a cube, a sphere, whatever it is. So let's just say I'm working with a cube. And I have taken and dropped a primitive cube in here, and I have a couple of sides to it, and I decide, okay, I'm going to make it editable. You come up here, make it editable, or you can hit C as a shortcut, and then boom, I have my cube. Maybe I make some adjustments. I like the point or the vertex adjustment, and then I make the shape that I want. Let's say that is the shape I want. I'm going to come in here and look, and I see I have a UVW tag. Now, UVW tags are how we map each of the objects in any software program whenever we're trying to map a texture, you want a UVW tag. Now, oftentimes it takes a little bit of effort, a lot of practice to sit there and unwrap and try and clean things up. I do things a little bit simpler, and it's not necessarily the right way, but it is the quicker way. So actually, I'm going to leave this back on here. So first step of this is I've created a whole bunch of parts, and no matter what I make, let's say I make a couple of cylinders, you know, that's my rotor, and then a couple of pylons, whatever I do, if I select these and I've now made them into editable parts, automatically Cinema 4D creates that UV tag. I want to select those, and you just literally click on the tag. You can hold shift and select multiples and delete them. Now you don't have a UVW map. This is what we want for what we're going to be doing. So what I've done here is I've already created that null. I'm going to make that active. By the way, if you hold Alt and you select the null itself, you can make everything active in the renderer. You can make it inactive in the renderer, inactive in the editor, or vice versa. So if I want to just see this here, I can actually take and adjust. So I'm not looking at the whole model because I don't want the whole model. I'm making this inactive in the editor and renderer right now. And then I'm going to take that null. I'm going to place all the parts that I want to paint into this null. And I see that I have one part here that maybe I don't want because I actually have specified, I have a blackout, which is actually the front end of this nose. So I don't need that in there. I'm going to leave my my painted texture there, even though it doesn't matter because that's just a flat painted part. So here's what we have. So we have our painted parts null, all these parts. Okay, cool. So now I just want to paint it. Well, there's a couple of steps to follow. I'll try and make this quick and painless for you. So to start with, I'm going to drop another primitive, a plane. I've already created one, and I've made it a little bit kind of ready to go here. All it is adjusted so that I can drag it up and set it in place, and then at the same time, here, let's actually do a side view, and I like looking at the left side. So if I'm looking at the left side here, I can change my display and go around shading lines. And I look at this, so the aircraft is split into two. I have my paint plate or palette, whatever you want to call it. And excuse me. So this is my reference. And what do I want to paint? Well, what I really want to paint is this image right here. So this is the paint scheme I'm going for. I like this red, white, and kind of bluish black type of paint scheme. It's just cool look, neat helicopter. That's what I'm going for. So I have a reference. I know what I want to paint. But how do I put that onto this model? So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the screen. And that's as simple. So first, actually, before I get too far into this, what I can do, and I have the option of, is this is a subdivided model. You'll see it has a subdivision tag on it, the subdivision surface. Everything has been dropped into that null. So I can go ahead and select my subdivision. In this particular instance, I have a subdivision of 1, which just means that as my quad model is, I can have a couple of reference lines. So this is useful to me. So if I can get this mostly in view and make sure that I capture the entire palette, so I have a good view of this palette, I'm literally going to Alt print screen. And if I come into my editor, or to, in this case, just Paint, Microsoft Paint, and I back out a little bit, I have my image in here. So what I want now is to select only that palette, because that's what's important. Everything around it doesn't matter, but we want to use this as a reference. Now I can save as a reference image. So now you want to use your choice of tool to do your paint. In this case, I am actually using After Effects. You can use something in terms of Photoshop. You can even use Microsoft Paint. It's not as versatile. So pick your poison here. I like After Effects because I can navigate the tools. I can do my animation for the video and compositing and all the cool effects. So After Effects is a great tool you can use for a number of things. So then I'm going to drop that reference into here like I've done. So now I have my reference. So that's that. I have my reference. Now what I need to do is I need to map that reference image to the aircraft. So how do I do that? So this is where it gets kind of interesting. So the reference that we created, we're going to take and I'm going to drag and drop into my materials. I'm going to double click it, get rid of reflectance because I don't need that. And I'm going to drag this onto that null that we created with all of these parts. Great. So we're on. Everything's good. So now I'm going to get rid of my subdivision just so I can navigate here. And the first thing you notice is, okay, nothing has changed. So if I go to Gorad Shading, but I don't see an image on there. Well, of course not, because we haven't yet mapped it. So we have to map it. How do we do this? So this is where you're going to come into your side view again. I'm going to take this, this texture, I'm going to go into tags and fit to region. Now, everything that's a child of this parent, everything that's down below this, is going to try and get mapped to this coordinate system. So if I just select that box that we've created, and mind you, I could be off a little bit here, and I drop and drag that on there, and then I select my subdivision. In fact, I'm going to bump that up one. And I'm even going to hide some rivets because I have a lot of parts here that are a little bit intensive. Well, now I at least see what's going on here. So if I go to Gorad Shading Lines, I can actually start to see that it looks like it's almost matched up. So I can't really tell the texture is not great quality, so I'm going to double click that texture editor, go in and say no scaling. So now when I look at my actual lines versus where the lines are in the picture, I'm pretty happy and see a lot of representative lines that are matching up here. So yes, I think I'm pretty close to where I've actually got this texture mapped up. Now I could make some adjustments and whatnot and then life would be fine, but in this case I'm happy enough here. We can always make adjustments later. So we've got that. I'm going to hide my paint plate because like I said, we're not actually doing anything with the paint plate. So now what I'm going to do is then I create my texture. And in this case I have created this texture as an overlay, and I'll go ahead and drop this down so you can see. So this is important to where you actually have the ability to sit there and use layers. So Photoshop or After Effects, something with layers, Corel is a good option. That way you can create these as you see fit. And in this case, all I've done is make a bunch of masks that will then create those layers, which will eventually become, let's go ahead and hide that, this texture. And this texture, go ahead and make this fully opaque. This texture is now going to be the drive of what it is that I want to make. Now just also so you can see, this is important. You want to make sure that your texture quality is large. So this is a 8K texture. So I have 8096 in terms of texture size. That's an important aspect of this. If you make it too small, you're going to start getting a real ugly rastering. And unfortunately, Cinema 4D is not yet good enough. This may be different for like R20 that's now released. I am using R17. Cinema 4D is not as good at doing any layering yet in terms of the internal texture. You can make layers upon layers, but you can't do that in terms of just importing a texture. So you can import a PSD though. So what I have here now is I need to create that texture. So if I come in, give me a sec here. All right. So if I come in here to the actual folder of the model, once I've rendered out the texture like I have here, I can open it and view it. That's the texture we want. Great. So I can drop and drag that into the file, into the model. So I've already done that, and I've already created some reflectance just to make life a little bit quicker. And I've done that by adding a GGX reflectance layer. I've given it a little bit of roughness, left the strength, gave it a Fresnel, and I'm pretty happy with what I have there. So I'm going to go ahead and use that one as my texture in place. So first off, I drop and drag and boom. Once it decides to talk back, there's our texture on the aircraft. In fact, it looks like it's just having a hard time loading it, so I'm going to reload all textures. There we go. So there's the texture as I want it on the aircraft. It was really that simple. Okay, so that's the start of it. So now you might say, okay, cool. So what exactly has this done for me? Well, in Cinema 4D, it is clever enough to understand when you want to put a texture on a part in this fashion. I can come and I can create my subdivision. In this case, I have rivets on the aircraft. Once it loads, and you see the rivets are actually matched to the texture as well, even to the point of the intersections of all the colors. So pretty happy with what we have here. That's the first step. So now what I say is great, texture's on there. Now I got to get this part out of here because I want the doors to be separate, so I have a clean hierarchy. So now I just drag and drop the door somewhere else. Cool, door's there. I'm going to hide the rest of this null, and then I'm going to open the door. Well, the door doesn't have a texture on it now. The reason being, it was all in the parent. Okay, so just drop and drag that texture onto the door. No, it won't work that way. Why? Because the axis coordinate system is very different from this local coordinate and from this local coordinate. So what do I do to make sure that this texture works? Okay, so you can stop panicking now and you can say, okay, there is an easy way to do this and we're going to make sure that you understand it. So this null that we've created, I'm going to hit Alt-G and it's going to recreate another null. I'm going to drag this out of that null. Now I have this null. This null is matched to the same null that all of the texturing has been created on. I'm going to grab that paint, control and drag it onto the null, move this up. Now here's the other thing. We already have an axis that we're happy with for the door. I already have it set so that I can rotate it properly along that axis point. So now I can get rid of that texture that I tried to paste on the door, and when I drop it right into here, it instantly now comes back and it gives us the exact same texture reference that we had before. And if that's not convincing enough, then what we'll do is go ahead and take this door. We're going to drag, oops, I copied that, sorry. I'm going to drag that out, and it does the same thing. I'm going to copy the same null that we just used. I'm going to delete that door. I'm going to grab this object, drop it into the null, and voila. The beautiful part about this is you may create additional nulls to do this. And you don't want to open your doors like this for obvious reasons. Your axis is way off. Your center of origin is way, way off. The good news is that now I have an extra null in there already I can get rid of. Now I can rotate the door and life is good. Well, it's kind of good. As you see, I'm rotating. What you're getting is a flat projection that is not maintaining that coordinate. It's almost a frontal projection. So there are things that we have to consider to make sure that that holds. So what I can do is I can come in, select that null, select that texture, come in, and I can assign it a UV point. So what we're going to do is, let's see. So all I really want to do is take the door, not the interior, not the handle or the window. just the rear door. So if I hide this, you can see that's what we're working with. I want this to have this texture. Now there's a lot of back and forth here, but in the end, it'll make your end result look great. I'm going to take this null again, Alt-G, lots of nulls, don't be afraid of them. Drop this null in. I can then take that texture tag, drop it into the null again, drop the rear on there. So now are we set? Well, no. Remember, we're still in a projection mode, so that texture is still only looking at the front-facing projection. But what I can do from here is I can say, I'm going to do Alt-G on this guy. So I'm creating another null. Yes, another null. And we're going to call this rear door open. However, actually we don't really need that because we already have a good null here to open the door. But I'm gonna go ahead and do that anyway. I'm gonna take this, select children by right clicking and then left clicking on select children, and then I'm gonna right click again and say connect objects and delete. So now what I can do is I can select that null, that texture by holding control, go to tags, generate UVW coordinates. Now I have this null that was the original mapped location. I can drop the door that has been textured, select this null again, right click, select children, right click, connect objects and delete. So what we've done is we've gone in a circle, and now I have a UVW mapped door that will hold this texture in place. Lots of running in circles. However, Cinema 4D allows you to do this, and it allows you to maintain and preserve those UV maps. And so you have a handful of steps for each component. If that's what you want to do, and you want to separate each component, you can do that. In this case, the only moving parts that I really have are the doors. Everything else here is pretty static, so I don't have to worry about doing that for everything else except for the doors. And the beautiful part is, let's say I do this rear door and I'm happy. So, so I'm going to remove that rear door. It's in the right axis point to rotate. Now I say, great. Well, I have to go through all that again for the other side? Well, this is a lot of work. Not necessarily. I'm going to delete that part. If it's just a mirrored part, what I would do is I would grab this rear door. I want to look toward the front because where you're looking will auto map this tool. You go under Character, Mirror Tool, and I have the coordinates set for view. I'm going to mirror that part that I just had, and look at this. It mirrors the door. So now I have a UV mapped door on the other side. The only problem is it sometimes doesn't carry the axis properly. So sometimes you have to make some adjustments to how the door is actually the axis coordinate system is adjusted. In this case, it's kind of a perfect set for the most part. So I'm all done then, right? Well, no. So the thing is that when I use that mirror image, here's what happens. If I select all of the components, not the null, this is important, all the objects, this is an object symbol, this is a null symbol. If I select all the objects, I select the faces, or the polygons tool, I hit Control A. You notice there's kind of a weird bluish color, purplish blue. That's because those are now reversed faces. I need to right click and then reverse the normals. And voila, they're reversed and they're perfectly mapped, and we've just saved ourselves a ton of time. So now I can use that door as if I was trying to use it in my model as I normally would. So if you have questions or comments, please feel free to post them. This is the quick and easy way of doing this process. you know, going through an entire unmap and then routing on body paint starts to become very exhausting. It's the right way to do it, but this is the quicker, easier way. And then there are other ways to move on past this, which I'll show in another video on how you can actually bake that texture into this component. So that's it for now on this tutorial. Thanks for watching, guys. Happy modeling.